be a little off. Right there.
You didn't make these law enforcement size.
Right. Oh, I was going to introduce, this is Cherie Castellano. I introduced her earlier to all of you. She is from Cop to Cop. She's going to open it up for us today.
Good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Cherie Castellano. I'm the director of the Cop to Cop program at Rutgers University Behavioral Health Care. The Cop to Cop program is recognized as a national best practice, utilizing retired officers as peer counselors and clinicians, and I'm proud to share that over the last 20 years, we have provided over 80,000 contacts to officers in crisis. It's been an honor to rescue the rescuers who often suffer from vicarious trauma, emotional and physical wounds as they selflessly serve others, yet it is clear that more needs to be done to serve them. The Cop to Cop Peer Helpline is just one piece of a continuum of care, but officers need to connect to each other face to face in the communities that they serve. We are thrilled at Cop to Cop that our Attorney General has the compassion and vision to take the lead to introduce the Officer Resiliency Directive statewide. It is my hope that officers will use these additional tools to seek help, and we are proud partners in this effort. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Attorney General Gurbir Grewal.
Thanks, Cherie. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Cherie, thank you for your remarks and for all the work that you do and for that kind introduction. And thank you to the City of Newark, to Police Director Ambrose, who unfortunately couldn't join us this afternoon, to Chief Henry for hosting us for this important announcement. We're here really to acknowledge that as a state and as a country, we've not done enough to support our law enforcement officers. And today in New Jersey, all of that changes. Today, we're stepping up for those that protect and serve us. You see, each and every day, our state's 36,000 law enforcement officers put their lives on the line for each of us. It doesn't matter where an officer is assigned. It doesn't matter whether they patrol suburban streets in a marked car, or walk a city beat on foot, or keep watch in a prison. Danger and risk is a constant for all of our officers. And to mitigate those dangers and to mitigate those risks, we prepare and train our officers on tactics. We outfit them with protective clothing. We equip them with guns and vests. But for too long, we've ignored a different threat, a threat that claims more and more lives each and every year, a threat that we are duty-bound to protect and to address. And that threat is the trauma, the stress, and strain of day-to-day law enforcement work. We ask our officers to respond to mass shootings, to calls of shots fired, to murder and suicide scenes, to overdoses, to motor vehicle accidents, and so many other traumatic scenes and stress-filled interactions. And we somehow expect them to go home at night or to return to work the next day as if nothing happened, as if it all were in a day's work. But experience and scientific evidence tell us a different story and show us the physical and the emotional harm that can come from the constant exposure to society's most difficult problems. It can affect an officer's health, reduce their quality of life, strain relationship with family and friends, and it can even lead officers down a darker path. And sadly, there's a culture within parts of our society, but especially among law enforcement today, that too often discourages our officers from seeking help. There's a fear of being stigmatized, a fear of being seen as weak, or a concern of adverse employment consequences. So instead of reaching out for assistance, far too many of our officers suffer in silence, often with devastating consequences, as many of the law enforcement executives on this stage well know. According to Blue Help, a nonprofit organization that tracks and monitors law enforcement suicides, at least 167 officers have taken their own lives since 2016. That's more than the total number of line of duty deaths during that same period. And one can argue that those numbers should also be included as line of duty deaths. And here's the thing, that actual figure might even be higher because we know that law enforcement suicides are historically underreported. And New Jersey's not immune from this problem. We've lost 37 officers to suicide since 2016. And we know that there are so many other officers who are out there attempting to cope by self-medicating. The time has come for all of that to end. And today I issued a statewide directive establishing the New Jersey Resiliency Program for law enforcement. We're calling it the Officer Resiliency Directive. And here's what this first-in-the-nation program does. It helps officers become better equipped to handle the day-to-day pressures of their jobs. It gives them opportunities to talk about the stresses of their job. And it provides them with the support that they deserve. The directive also creates a new statewide position, a Chief Resiliency Officer, who's responsible for overseeing the implementation and coordination of this program across our state. And I'm delighted to announce that we've appointed Rob Sepio from our Division of Criminal Justice to serve as the state's first ever Chief Resiliency Officer. Rob is to my right, and I want to thank him for stepping up in this initiative. Thank you, Rob. In addition, the directive also requires that every law enforcement agency in New Jersey appoint at least one Resiliency Program Officer, or RPO, who once trained will be responsible for implementing the program in their department. And by the end of 2022, every single law enforcement officer in the state of New Jersey will be trained on this program. And here's another key part of this program. If an officer needs help, they can go to any Resiliency Program officer, any RPO across the state. They don't have to go to their own agency's RPO, because we know that that stigma that I talked about earlier is not going to disappear overnight. So with this directive, we're sending a message to our state's law enforcement officers that their physical and emotional well-being is our top priority in this state. And we're hopeful that this training will enable our officers to recognize and cope with the day-to-day stressors of their jobs, that it'll make them more comfortable discussing their emotional and mental health, that it'll make them more willing to seek help when they truly need it, so they no longer need to suffer in silence. Our law enforcement officers make extreme sacrifices for each of us every day in their selfless service to the residents of this state. We need to be just as vigilant in protecting their safety and their well-being. They give us their very best, and we owe them nothing less than ours. Now it's my great honor to introduce a partner in this effort, as well as many other efforts on behalf of our state's law enforcement officers. That's New Jersey PBA President Pat Colligan. Pat?
Thank you, General. Thank you, General. The New Jersey State PBA had 17 members victims of suicide last year. If we had 17 line of duty deaths in this state, we'd be screaming. And 17 suicides quietly go by the wayside. It's one of the most difficult phone calls I get. I always feel like it's a preventable death, that we miss somebody, we miss something, we miss some trigger. Sometimes we don't. I don't want to pretend that we're going to catch every officer with this program. This is just another tool in the toolbox. But for those who sit at home and think that my cops are in a small town or they never pull their guns, that's not what kills us. What kills us are the continued calls to horrible car accidents and CPR in a family home in front of the kids. That's the cumulative effect, and that's what builds up in our officers. And hopefully this is another program that will save officers' lives. Again, 17 last year alone in the New Jersey State PBA. Just again, the most difficult phone call I can ever get. So I appreciate being able to participate in this program. And again, we're looking for this as another tool in our toolbox. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. I want to call up another partner in this effort, and as well as other efforts on behalf of New Jersey's law enforcement officers. And that's Jim Stewart, who's the FOP Vice President from right here in Newark. Jim?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm 50 years old. For half of my life, I've been a police officer in this city. I could tell you standing here that I've never personally been touched by suicide. No family member, no friends, no kids I grew up with, no baseball coach, no neighbor down the street. But in those same 25 years, I've been touched by at least 20 suicides of people that I know, people that I've interacted with, people that I've had drinks with, people I've gone on jobs with. 20. So I stand here today, I commend the Attorney General for recognizing this problem, for taking the initiative, for being the first one in this nation to do so, and recognizing that there clearly is a connection with the job the men and women of law enforcement do out there every day and the subsequent suicides that plague so many of us. There's a gap there. It needs to be bridged. And again, I commend the people behind me for taking that first step and looking to resolve this problem. Thank you.
I'd like to call up Chief Chris Lusner, who's the president of the New Jersey State Chiefs of Police Association, to share some remarks on behalf of the association. Chief.
Thank you, John. Thank you for being here today to help shed light on this very important initiative. Police officers have a very challenging and difficult job. They see the worst of society and see terrible, terrible things while performing their duties and trying to keep us all safe. I know every police officer carries with them calls they've handled that will stay with them forever. These calls just kind of live inside of you, and many of our officers are understandably impacted. We as law enforcement leaders need to continue to enhance our efforts to support our officers, and this is what this Officer Resiliency Directive is aimed to do. Just to give you some context, we lost 114 officers to suicide so far this year. 60 were in the line of duty. We need to remove the stigma for officers to ask for help and create a culture where talking about these issues in the open is the norm, and communicate to our officers that asking for help is a show of strength. I am confident this directive will help create this culture and save lives. I want to thank Attorney General Graywall for his leadership on this very important issue. I know members of the working group in Burlington County, assembled by the Attorney General, have worked very hard, and I thank them for their efforts. The members of the New Jersey State Association of Chiefs of Police are committed to the implementation of this very important initiative across the state.
As you can see by the presence of individuals behind me, this is truly a collaborative effort. But there's one particular office and group of individuals that really drove this and brought it to the attention of the Attorney General's office, and that's Prosecutor Scott Cafina from the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office, First Assistant Prosecutor Phil Arana, who's over here as well on the dais behind me, as well as members of the extended Burlington County Prosecutor's Office family that have been touched by this firsthand, and we have family members here as well present supporting our announcement this morning. Or this afternoon, rather. So I want to thank Scott for really being a driving force behind this initiative, to bringing it to the attention of the Attorney General's office, for working with us on the very large working group behind this initiative, including many of the folks who are here this afternoon. And with that, I want to turn it to Scott Cafina, prosecutor from Burlington County. After that, we'll answer your questions. Scott?
Good afternoon. I would like to express my gratitude to Attorney General Graywall and Director Allende for their wholehearted embrace of officer resiliency. We corralled Veronica during her first month on the job to share with her the promising work that the folks up here had been doing in Burlington County to promote officer resiliency, and she immediately became a champion and presented the program to the Attorney General, who in turn picked up the torch and led us to this important milestone today. Thank you both for your leadership. Today's directive is only the beginning. We look forward to the day in the near future when discussing officer resiliency is not news, but rather a routine part of staying healthy and safe on the job, just like physical fitness and firearms proficiency. Our colleagues on the task force represented here today have done incredible work to open eyes and open doors to a better understanding of mental wellness by law enforcement officers and their families. We will continue to work hard to help officers recognize and address the unique stress that comes with managing a difficult work schedule, family life, the ravaging effects of violent crime, and the hypervigilance that is demanded by the possibility of a life-threatening situation at every call or car stop. Everybody faces stresses in their lives. Not everybody faces these kinds of stress. The investment in officer resiliency unveiled by the Attorney General today will pay extraordinary dividends to us all. We will see success in many ways, in officers leading healthier lives with more job satisfaction and fulfillment in their personal lives, in officers' families having a better understanding of what their loved ones go through, in officers functioning in a better frame of mind and thus having more positive interactions with the community members they serve, and in officers facing retirement with eager anticipation of a new chapter in their lives rather than as a loss of their identity and self-worth. We also will call it a win each time an officer feels comfortable and confident stating these three simple words, "I need help." It is very fitting that Attorney General Graywall presents his Officer Resiliency Directive on the day of National Night Out, when law enforcement agencies across the state and the country reach out and embrace the communities they serve. This program is a warm embrace back to our law enforcement officers, and we look forward to advancing opportunities for them to make the most of this selfless profession they have chosen. Thank you.
Just a few additional acknowledgments before we turn to your questions about the directive. From the Division of Criminal Justice, I too want to thank Director Allende for her leadership here, Bureau Chief Rob Sepiel to her right, Special Assistant to the Director, Sarah Quigley, right behind her. The Superintendent of the State Police, Patrick Callahan, could not be here, but Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Noble, the Deputy Superintendent, is to my right. I want to thank the State Police for their efforts in this regard as well. From the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office, I already mentioned Prosecutor Kafina and First Assistant Phil Airnow, Detective Brian Lloyd, and Lieutenant Michael Wiltsey, who are also here. I want to thank them. I'd like to thank the County Prosecutors Association of New Jersey, in particular the Ocean County, Mercer County Prosecutors' Offices, the County Detectives Chiefs Association. I want to thank Prosecutor Stevens from Essex, who's present with us on the dais this afternoon, the PBA, the FOP, the New Jersey State Troopers Fraternal Association, representatives of whom are here, the New Jersey State Troopers NCO, Non-Commissioned Officers Association, the New Jersey State Troopers Superior Officers Association, the New Jersey State Association of Chiefs of Police, including past presidents Rich Busby, Gary Gubby, the Passaic County Sheriff's Office Superior Officers Association, the New Jersey Chaplains Association. Gary Holden is with us and a leader in this effort and so many other efforts, including the chaplaincy program, the Atlantic County Sheriff's Department, the New Jersey Department of Corrections and Camden County Department of Corrections, the New Jersey State Parole Board, the New Jersey Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services, Disaster and Terrorism Branch, Acadia Healthcare, and numerous police departments that participated in this effort, and as well as Cherie Castellano from Cop to Cop. Again, incredible partners, along with so many others who we've listed in our press release. But again, truly a collaboration on a critically important issue that we've done far too little on in the past. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions you may have about the directive and the announcement this afternoon. Yes, sir.
Can you just give us a sense what this training will involve?
So the training, initially we're starting with a 2-day summit on October 10th and 11th at the War Memorial to introduce the program to the designated resiliency program officers. After that, it's 12 blocks of training, and they're pretty intensive blocks that focus on 4 core tenets that focus on an officer's spiritual health, their mental health, their physical health, their emotional well-being, and it's based on a program that the FBI started in conjunction with the Air Force that we've adopted for law enforcement. But the specific modules we can give you a listing of that will be included in those 12 sessions. It's a 2-day training for each officer, which can be done in 2 days or spread out over a period of time. But it's, again, to give them the coping mechanism, to give them the tools that they need to deal with the stress that they encounter on a day-to-day basis, to give them access to help. This is not in the place of resources like Cop to Cop, not in the place of the chaplains program, but it's a way to have that warm handoff to service as well. So it's 1, training the officers, 2, having individuals in place in each of our departments or in other department you can go to pass you on to service and the help that you need. Steve?
What's the officers' interactions going to look like between these RPOs and the actual officers? Are they going to sit down? It's going to be like a counseling session? Like, what's the actual job going to look like?
The RPO is the conduit to tell them about the services that are available. So each officer in the state by 2022 will be trained on the core principles to be armed with those tools that we talk about, to how to manage stressful situations and how to build up that resiliency, how to spiral up instead of spiraling down, as we talk about in these programs. So they'll have the core tools to be more resilient, to be more able to deal with the day-to-day stresses. And that RPO is the one who's going to marry them up to any additional service that they need, whether they need to be passed off to a peer, a cop to let them know about that, private providers, or the chaplains program. And if you don't feel comfortable, like I said, because the stigma will take some time to disappear, you can go to any police department. These lists will be available within each police department for law enforcement officers to look at and find someone they can talk to. It's just being present and being available and offering help.
General, so in other words, that situation does not exist today where somebody in each department would be able to say, hey, it sounds like you're looking for help, let me suggest this X, Y, Z?
That's a great question. It does exist, but in a patchwork form. It doesn't exist on a statewide basis. Some departments do it, but a lot of departments don't. And we have hundreds of, nearly 500 departments in the state. So we want a consistent program that is available statewide. So the state police has their own peer-to-peer and employee assistance programs. A lot of other departments do. Maple Shade has been a leader in these efforts. But what we wanted to do was take best practices, deploy them statewide, and that's what we've done with this program.
Would I assume correctly that part of the RPO's job might be, he or she is going to know the people in their department, somebody looks like they're struggling or they've been through a difficult time, would they approach that officer and say, hey, how's it going, or whatever?
I mean, I'd like to get to a point where we have a culture like that, where people feel comfortable talking about these issues. But right now, the RPO is going to be a point of contact that anyone can go to. I imagine over a period of time, we will get to a place where we could talk about these issues more comfortably, and people will feel more comfortable reaching out and offering that helping hand to somebody. And that's the goal: changing culture, providing resources, and improving lives for our officers. Yes, sir.
Is there a specific incident that made you feel like your office feel like it should be a statewide program, or is this a culmination of the trend we're seeing here in the state as national?
Sheriff Kemmler's here from Mercer County. We all, as Jim Stewart talked about, we all know somebody who's taken their own life. For me, in the fall of last year, I met Sheriff's Officer Pablo Santiago at an event in Mercer County at a holiday breakfast. He invited me to engage in some community service work in February of this year. On December 26th of last year, the day after Christmas, while I was at dinner with my family, I got a call that he had taken his own life. And I think anyone who has met Pablo Santiago would tell you that he's probably the last person who would have taken his own life. He was larger than life. I only met him twice, and I took a selfie with him on that last occasion, smile ear to ear, and I was looking forward to doing some homeless feedings with him in Trenton that he invited me to, and that appointment was on my calendar. It never happened, and that motivated me, I think, a little bit more to get this done. Right there in the back, Steve.
I have two questions, please. What are the most often cited reasons for the suicide? And does the suicide rate among police officers differ from the general population?
I don't have those data points, and I don't know if the members of law enforcement behind me do, but I would venture to say that there are few professions. There are few professions where we ask somebody, as we did in El Paso over the weekend, as we did in Dayton over the weekend, to respond to a scene of a mass shooting, to try to neutralize and apprehend the perpetrator of that mass shooting, to then go make sense of who survived that shooting and then who's died from that shooting, and then to process that crime scene, and then ask those people to go home at night and come back again to work tomorrow as if nothing happened. I would venture to say that no other profession in this country deals with the stressors that our law enforcement officers deal with. And you and I will never know them. We could say we appreciate the dangers and the stress they're under. Unless we've walked in their shoes, we will never know it. So that's what I'm 100% certain about, that this is one of the most stressful, if not the most stressful professions, and they deal with the most traumatic experiences, and that's just one example.
My second question is the word hypervigilance. They said that officers face hypervigilance. Now, some police officers listening to this might say, that's a nice euphemism for constant second guessing. From prosecutors, chiefs, mayors, all sorts of politicians, every time they have something that, a split-second decision, they're constantly being second-guessed. And you didn't address that. That must be a tremendous stress inducer for police officers.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment. I mean, I think there are a few professions, again, with the amount of stress and second guessing than law enforcement. Every move is second guessed, every action is second guessed. We expect them to be perfect, and that adds to the job stresses that they face under very difficult circumstances. So I think we implemented early warning systems last year. And I think we're quick to raise red flags when officers make mistakes, but we're slow to offer them the help to avoid raising those red flags in the first place. This is a first step to make sure that we offer help to our officers so they don't trip any red flags. I would love to be in a world where we didn't need any early warning systems and had no red flags. But I'm not naive enough to think that we'll ever get there. But what we can do is our best here to offer our officers all the tools that they need, another tool in their toolbox to deal with the stress of their job. Steve, and then here.
Those last two questions.
Did you want to add anything on the data points?
No, it's Sheree.
Sheree, anything on the data points on suicide number?
In terms of the
Numbers? Yeah, if you have it handy.
Yeah. I really didn't want to speak to the numbers, more so to what we find in psychological autopsies and understanding trends in law enforcement suicide, that the cumulative stress and the vicarious trauma and everything we've heard about really create sort of a picture of an officer who doesn't have anywhere to go, feels stigmatized, may or may not have a substance abuse issue, may or may not have a marital issue, from the family stress from serving the community and feeling misunderstood, as well as depression or anxiety that needs to be addressed. So the PTSD and all of that goes with the job is really what's behind so often the officer's demise and crisis.
Michael?
My question is about, you have all these different law enforcement officers here, judicial officers here, talking about this really important issue and talking about the stigma surrounding this issue. How much more difficult is it now after you had the President of the United States stand up yesterday and call people mentally ill monsters, in other words that he used? How do you overcome the stigma when you have the leader of the free world who stands up and says these kind of things, and you're asking people to voluntarily come forward and get help?
As I mentioned in my remarks, there are segments of our society that stigmatize mental illness, and that makes our jobs much more difficult. It exists in law enforcement, it exists in mainstream society, and it's unfortunate it exists in places of authority. But we're committed on this stage, and we're committed in this state to drawing the stigma away from mental illness, especially when it comes to our law enforcement officers. So I don't have to get another call on December 26th. So we don't have to get another call in the middle of the night that a law enforcement officer was too afraid to seek help and took their own life. And I don't know what the metric of success is, but if we could help one, this is well worth it. If we could help two, it's even better. And if we could just be there as a resource for that moment where somebody feels comfortable enough to seek help, then it's a success. Joe?
It sounds like the RPOs are going to be almost like social workers for their peers. You know, if I'm characterizing that incorrectly, let me know. But how do you plan to prepare them for that job in addition to being a police officer?
So we're doing a train the trainer. The event on the 10th and 11th of August is a start. We realize that by virtue of being an RPO, they might be even exposed to even more stress and trauma, and we need to be vigilant about that. But we have professionals who will be training them to serve as trainers and to serve as those resources in their local departments, and we're mindful of that, that might be an issue. Last one, Steve. Oh, no, he didn't.
Others you can email.
Let me go over here. He didn't get a question, Steve, and I'll talk to you right afterwards.
Is this program extended to retired police officers as well, or is there another program that they can utilize?
So I'll defer to Sheree on Cop to Cop involves retired law enforcement officers who serve as peers, and I believe you're open to anyone who wants to call who's been in law enforcement. So the framework that we've set up here is for current law enforcement, but in my mind, if we get a program that is successful and a structure that works, we would like to open it up to retired law enforcement. We'd like to open it up to other first responders, to our firefighters, to our EMS, who also deal with some of the same types of stresses that we've identified for law enforcement. So that's the goal down the road, and that's a structure. And in fact, we borrowed a structure from the federal family when we implemented our program, so we hope to make it available more broadly in the future. Thank you, everyone.
We do off topic.
I think we're running kind of late.
All these people are on the stage with me, so I'll be happy to talk to you. Yeah, so, okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jeff.
I came into the This is so exciting. I didn't get to hug Phil. I don't know yet. Oh my God. Oh my God. I was like, wait, what? Done. Let's do it. Let's do it tomorrow. Let's do it right this second. Let's put it in the account. Let's do it right now. Yeah, so we're excited.